Hey VCers, it's Matt, and I'm checking in on Sunday with to continue our adventures of reviewing Beach Boy albums in order of release. And so it's kind of hard to believe because I started off with this. I think it's been 2 years or more when I did the first album. Time goes quick, but we are getting toward the end here. Not counting this album, there are three more albums to go, unless the band releases another album between now and when I get to that. But so it's light at the end of the tunnel. So this next album that I'm going to going to review today, came out in the 80s, and so they only released three albums in the 80s, which unfortunately turns out to be three albums too many, but we'll get to that in a minute. And then I think in the 90s they only released two. But without further ado, we come to 1989's Still Cruisin' by the Beach Boys. This came out August of 1989, and it actually was their best charting album since 15 Big Ones in 1976. It got to number 46 in the United States and number 78 in England. Both positions turns out are far too high for this album, unfortunately. Also had their first number one single since Good Vibrations back in 1966, but we'll get to that in time. Um, yeah, this album was their first album since 1985. Of course, their other one from the 80s came out in 1980, and you can see my reviews of those on the two reviews before this. So this was inspired, I guess, by their first number one single in 20 some years, which actually is kind of a weird deal because that song hit number one, was released in July of 88, the year before, and hit number one somewhere back in 88. But then they released this album a year later, so it's kind of strange. It's kind of like Good Vibrations being on Smiley Smile, and that single had been released in 66, and it shows up on a late 67 Beach Boys album. But anyway, so yeah, this is limited participation by Brian Wilson on this album. He writes a song, and I think he sings on one or two others. So not very much. He was still entangled with that Dr. Landy mess, and still having his problems at that point. And in retrospect, he's probably glad that he didn't have much anything to do with this album. The concept of this album, according to Mike Love, the genius, and the driving force of the band, probably by this time, unfortunately, was that these were supposed to be songs that had been Beach Boy songs that had been featured in recent movies, and but that is the case on the album with all but three songs, and the fact that three of the songs on here were not in movies uh, means that the album got watered down in politics, according to Love, which, idiot boy. Not that it would have mattered, because really and truly, by 1989, just as I said for the 80 and the 85 albums, nobody really cared much about the Beach Boys one way or the other anymore, other than as an oldies act. And the fact that they got a number one song that's on this album was is not a credit to the quality of the song or interest in the band so much as it's just one of those fluke things that the band happened to have a song in the right place at the right time, or for those who had to listen to that song in the wrong place at the wrong or right time, because we had to endure the song. So, yeah, let's see here. Just look at my notes real quick. Here's the cover. I guess that's a hood of a Corvette or something. It is so-so cover. Here's the back, just a song listing and some notes there. Who in 1962 would have predicted that 27 years later the Beach Boys would still be riding the crest of popular music? I don't know, it's a pretty debatable statement. For those who like to see the actual, or the record label, they were back on Capitol. They had been on, I can't remember what they were on for their last album, the one that was just called The Beach Boys. But they were on Capitol for just this one album, and then their contract expired again. So deservedly so, probably. And yeah, so that's kind of a boring cover. This album, even though it charted better than any other album since 1976 of theirs, it's long out of print. When they did the vinyl is been out of print for years, and it's something of a collector's item. Kind of hard to find. It's not extremely rare, but these go in the $20 to $50 range if you can find a copy on vinyl. And the CD has been out of print too. When they did the reissue programs where they did the double up the two Beach Boys albums on one CD for pretty much the entire band's catalog, for the most part, they didn't include this, and they didn't include the two that come after this either. But anyway, so yeah, out of print, kind of a collector's item, but just because it's a collector's item doesn't equal quality. You know, John Lennon Life with the Lines is a collector's item too. So yeah, so let's get to the music, if we must. First song on side one is called "Still Cruising," the title song of the album. This was in the movie Lethal Weapon 2, which I remember seeing that movie back in '89. I don't know that I've ever seen it since, but I don't remember the song being in there, but I'm sure it was. Probably just wasn't paying any attention. It's written by Mike Love, Terry Melcher. Mike Love and Terry Melcher wrote it. Mike, Al Jardine, and Carl Wilson share vocals on it. It actually came out as a single, went all the way to number 93 in America, but it got to number 11 in Australia. I'm not sure. I remember there was a good-looking girl in Lethal Weapon 2, and she was Australian, so maybe I think she was Australian. Maybe that's where that played in. I don't know. And Lethal Weapon 2 was, I guess, an okay movie, but it's nothing great. I can't really. It's better than Kokomo, which is also on. That's the number one song that we'll get to in a bit. But I can't say too much else for it. Kind of a slick and soulless number. Some of the vocals are kind of nice. I'll give it that. I'll give it a 2, just based on some nice vocals. But there's really not much else you can say about it. It's not a very good song. Second song is called "Somewhere Near Japan." This is one of the songs that was not in any movie. This song was written by Bruce Johnston, Mike Love, Terry Melcher, and John Phillips, the guy in the Mamas and Papas. Love, Carl, Al, and Bruce share vocals. You know you're in trouble when you've got these songs written by a committee there where there's like 5 people writing them. It's sort of one of the big reasons music is so bad nowadays, because you got all these no talent American Idol pop tarts that are just sort of processed and marketed, and you have these teams who do their songwriting and teams who work on their image and stuff, and this kind of smacks of that. And it's just song by committee, music by committee. It doesn't work. It's pointless, easy listening music. When it opens up and you got kind of this faux Japanese sounding music, you know you're in trouble right away. It sounds like the kind of song that would have been in a bad Charlie Sheen movie from 1987 or 88. It's the inspiration for this song is supposedly John Phillips' daughter, Mackenzie Phillips, the girl that was in One Day at a Time, who was her and her husband, I guess at the time, I don't know, were on their honeymoon, and she was calling her dad, telling him to send drugs or money, and he was trying to find out where she was, and all he got was somewhere near Japan. So not the cheeriest thing, but all that aside, the song, I can't even give it a 1. It gets a 0. It's just bad. Third song is Island Girl. This also was not in a movie. This was written by Al Jardine, and Carl, Al, and Mike share vocal duties on it. This kind of sounds like they're trying to invoke the spirit of a luau on a tropical island. kind of got that laid back Caribbean steel drum sound that's just a snooze and sounds like Jimmy Buffett, Margaritaville, Cheeseburger in Paradise type crap songs. Nothing else to say about it. I'm going to give that a 0 too because I can't go a 1 on it. It's just so bad. Things improve slightly with song number 4. This song is called In My Car, not in a film either. Written by Brian, and Brian, Carl, and Al share the vocals. It's kind of the closest, well, not kind of, it's the closest thing to a decent song on the album. Sounds very, very slightly like the Beach Boys of old, a little bit, but the production's bad. The vocals are just real compressed or fuzzy, kind of hard to make out what they're singing. Not that it would really matter because it's not that great a song. It's the best thing on this album. Well, with an exceptions, 3 exceptions we'll get to at the end of the album, but it I mean, being the best song on this album, considering what else is on this album, is no great feat. But I'll give it a 2.5. It's sort of kind of okay. Number 5, we come to that number 1 song, Kokomo, from the movie Cocktail. Saw that movie. That was a terrible movie. Tom Cruise. I don't know whoever gave the kid the idea that he can act, because he can't. I don't know that he's ever made a good movie. And that was one of the worst movies that he's made. It's written by Mike Love, Scott McKenzie, the people go to San Francisco and wear flowers in your hair when you go to San Francisco, that guy. Terry Milcher, John Phillips again, Love and Carl sing vocals, share vocals. You got the feeling that Mike Love thinks this is like a classic for the Beach Boys, but apparently a lot of people agreed because it went to number 1. I don't know. There's no accounting for taste. It's not only maybe the Beach Boys' worst song. It's one of the worst songs ever. Those list of terrible songs that do the Macarena and Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head and Been Through the Desert and a Horse with No Name, Bye Bye Miss American Pie. It's up there with that. It's just excrement. I'm going to give the song a 10. A negative 10, that is, because I can't even work up the enthusiasm to give that song a 0. It's with a heavy heart that I continued on to side 2. Side 2 opens with the song Wipeout, which was not in a movie. Of course, that's the classic song by the Safaris that we all know. Pretty good song. Shows up on the oldies radio still to this day all the time. This is the Beach Boys version of Wipeout, but someone in their infinite wisdom decided to team the Beach Boys up with the Fat Boys. And it's as bad as if you haven't heard it, it's as bad as you're thinking. The original plan was to try to do it with Run DMC, but Mike Love apparently went and made a deal with the Fat Boys. I think he had told Run DMC he was going to do it with them, but then went behind their back and made a deal with the Fat Boys. It's so bad that it's... this was released as a single, apparently. It got to number 12 in the United States, which shows that we're a nation filled with idiots, and got to number 2 in England, and usually those people know better music-wise as far as discerning tastes and all, but I guess in 1989 they didn't. It's a 0. There's really nothing else to say about it. It's horrible, and it's got that scratch the record thing that was on every single rap song ever made back in the 80s and 90s. I'm not sure they still do that anymore, but anyway, let's move on to something just as bad. Second song is called Make It Big. This was written by Terry Melcher, Mike Love, and somebody named Bill House. Don't know who that is. Carl, Brian, and Love and Al share vocal duties. This was featured in the movie Troop Beverly Hills, which I I remember that being out in the theaters. I remember seeing it in the video store. I think I might have saw a little bit of it on HBO later after it ran in the theaters. It was, I think it was the girl from Cheers, the Shelley Long. I think she's the star of that, and she's like a scoutmaster for some Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts or something. I don't think I ever watched the whole movie because it looked really stupid. And this sounds like the kind of song that would have been in one of those crappy, like those type movies back in the late 80s, and that's exactly what it is. It gets a 0. Um, Things improved with the last three songs just because, and the only reason the last three songs are in here was that they had been featured in recent movies of the time of like 87, 88, 89 period. These are old Beach Boys songs from the 60s. So the last three songs are I Get Around, Wouldn't It Be Nice, and California Girls, which I've already talked about those on earlier when I was back in the 60s album reviews. Those would all be tens, of course. I think California Girls I might give a 9 because I've never liked it, but it's never been one of my favorite. The other two, of course, would be a 10. I Get Around was in the movie Good Morning Vietnam, Robin Williams movie, which I saw back then. It was a pretty good movie. I was never a huge Robin Williams fan. I loved the movie Garp, World According to Garp. Other than that, I was never a huge fan of his. I never liked Mork and Mindy. Good Morning Vietnam was okay at the time. If I saw it now, I don't know if I'd still like it or not. Wouldn't It Be Nice was featured in The Big Chill, which came out in, what was that, 83, 84. It was a good movie. I haven't seen that in years. Need to watch that again sometime. And California Girls was in Soul Man. Was a stupid movie. I remember I did see that. It was a really dumb movie. It was the guy that's in The Hitcher was the star of that, where he paints himself black to try to get a scholarship to college, to go to Harvard or something. Dumb movie. The band do themselves no favors by including these songs from when they were great alongside these songs from when they should have broken up years ago and were crap. Um, I guess it's nice to have this just on the basis that it's out of print and kind of hard to find. I don't know that I'm ever listen to it again. I'm going to give an overall grade. I'm going to uh, pretend like Get Around, Wouldn't It Be Nice, and California Girls aren't on here because obviously those would rate high. But take those out of the mix, and I would give this album, because of In My Car, I'll give it a 0.5. That's not a 0, not a 1, but a 0.5. And yeah, nobody needs this album. So it's a shame that probably arguably America's greatest band was reduced to this point by 1989. We got 3 more albums to go. We'll see if things get any better. And hope you all have a good weekend, and we'll talk to you later.